All right, my friend. So I got an email from Loida. She was touched by my testimony of my 22 years of sobriety, and she had emailed me a couple things. So we're tossing emails back and forth. This is actually pretty important. It talks about the importance of having disability insurance. So let me share it with you. She goes, "Hey, Josh. I was an insurance agent." This is after we talked about, her experience with folks with drinking and other problems, and my experience as well. And then she said she retired from the financial services industry, and I said, okay. And I just asked her, what were you doing? And she goes, I was an insurance agent for 35 years. The last 15 with a company that provided 403B and 457 plans to school district employees, in addition to disability, life, and cancer plans. I absolutely loved what I did, but I had to retire for medical reasons 3 years ago. Disability insurance has been a lifesaver for us. Now, she is an insurance person working in insurance, so she's obviously going to have a lot of insurance coverage for sure. But let me say it again. Disability insurance has been a lifesaver for us. My husband has a pension, and I have not touched my 401k, which as a prior employee has no administrative fees. The only fees is the funds management, which ends up being about $1,600 a year. She got about $835,000 in there. So that's one. Yeah, that's pretty cheap, Lowida. That's pretty cheap. If you got $835,000 in a 401k and you're only paying $1,600 total, that's ain't too shabby. I've looked into Vanguard, which you have recommended with very low cost. So off the top of my head, so if you have $835,000, you're paying 1%. That's gonna be $8,350. So if you got $1,600, ain't nothing, man. I had no qualm with that at all. I've always felt $835,000 wasn't enough because my goal was at least $1 million, which at 4% a year would be $40,000 a year of income I could take. I've listened to your program and learned a lot from you, so it's been a godsend, especially when you show how someone with only $300,000 is able to retire. I also appreciate so much when you teach about Social Security. Thanks for all you do. All right, so I want to talk about this. I get a lot of questions about disability insurance, long-term disability insurance, and then long-term care. I want to talk about the difference, actually, because long-term care insurance, all right, is different than disability. All right, there's caring versus curing. Caring is long-term insurance, long-term care. You're being cared for. You're not going to be cured. Does that make sense? So being cared for is a long-term probability. If you have long-term disability insurance, you don't have long-term care. They're two completely different items. Long-term disability will usually cover you about, it depends on the policy you get, but generally speaking, it'll cover you 90 days or something, or 120 days until long-term care kicks in. That's kind of what Medicare works on, by the way. So Medicare, you have 90 days of coverage, 110, where I think the last 20 days are pretty expensive, something like that. You'd have to talk to J.O., or the lady over at Boomer Benefits, Danielle Roberts over at Boomer Benefits, to get a gauge of that. But long-term care kicks in after essentially your premium or your deduction on Medicare or your long-term disability kicks in. Does that make sense? So two distinct, separate policies that you need. A lot of people poo-poo long-term disability because they'll say, I'm not going to get hurt, or I'm working in a job where the likelihood of me being hurt is minimal. Well, here's Loida, I'm sorry to not pronounce her name right. She was working in a white-collar job doing paperwork, and she still got disabled. How? I don't know. She didn't say, but she still did, and she still needed the money to pay the bills. What long-term disability will do as well is only pay you about 65% of your pre-income. So essentially they're saying, this is an interesting scenario, by the way. If you're making $100,000 a year, they're only going to pay you $65,000 a year. Why? Because you're not paying taxes, you're not paying FICA, you're not making 401k contributions. Isn't that interesting? That we're always using this 80% rule for financial planning and retirement income, but with long-term disability is 65%. Why would that be? Because they realize, man, that if you're in long-term disability, you no longer have FICA, you no longer have your 401k or 403b contributions, you no longer have your state or your federal income tax. Interesting, huh? And yet, oh, you need 80% to retire on. Silly, silly. So long-term disability is not cheap, and the reason for that is because a lot of times people making pretty good money need a doctor. If you're an anesthesiologist and you have your long-term disability coverage, if you can no longer practice anesthesiology, that's going to pay you a lot of money, for which you're going to pay a lot of premium for that. That's the difference between long-term disability. It really depends on your work. If you're working in a computer warehouse or something like that, and you're just typing in emails all day for client services, well, you're not likely to get injured, so the premiums can be much lower. If you're working in a warehouse or on a roof or something like that, long-term disability is going to be pretty expensive because you could fall off the ladder and hurt yourself drastically. Thus, they're going to charge you more for the premium. You got to remember the difference between the two. Long-term disability is not, I cannot repeat enough, is not long-term care. Long-term care is completely different. A lot of people say, well, I got long-term disability at work. Nah, you don't have long-term care. Or they'll say, I got AD&D for life insurance at work. Nah, that doesn't necessarily mean anything when it comes to real life insurance. So you got to know this stuff. Seeing an agent, the life insurance agent or an insurance agent, is a good thing. You got to find someone you trust, though, man. And that's hard. Who do you know who you trust? I don't know. That's a tough thing. That's a tough thing to go. Because insurance agents, they get paid by commission. They get paid to sell you something. So there's always going to be a sale that you have to contend with. When I went to Knights of Columbus to get my long-term care insurance, I had to sell him to sell me because he didn't know what he was doing, which was painful, frankly. And I also got a second to die life insurance for me in Charlotte. Again, he didn't know what they were, and I had to sell him to sell me. That's a challenge. And some of these life insurance agents are going to be just not that astute in insurance business. Some will be better. Some will be better at sales, and some will be better knowledgeable. It's just a tough road to hoe. But you gotta look at your stuff. If you are in a work environment that if you were to get hurt and can no longer provide an income, like our friend Louita here, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Your long-term disability saved her, is what she said. So think about that. All right, we'll see you next time.